Security. Get that little girl out of here before I call the police. The voice echoed through the marble hall of the 50-story skyscraper, causing all the executives in suits to stop and watch the embarrassing scene. David Santos, only 22 years old, stood motionless in front of the gilded reception desk as two security guards approached. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from an emotion he had been trying to contain for months. The young man had traveled across 3 states by bus, slept in shelters, and saved every penny for 6 months to get there. "Please, I just need 5 minutes with Mr. Richardson," David said, her calm voice contrasting with the chaos around her. "It's about my sister." Tycoon Daniel Richardson, owner of a real estate empire valued at $8 billion, descended the Italian marble stairs like a king bothered by a subject. His suit cost more than David's family's annual income, and his Italian shoes shone as brightly as the contempt in his eyes. "Listen carefully," said Richardson, stopping a few feet away, as if David were contagious. "I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but it won't work here. My company doesn't give handouts." David took a deep breath and pulled a crumpled photo of an 8-year-old girl smiling in a hospital bed from his pocket. "Sir, my sister Sophia has been in the hospital for 3 months. The doctor said she needs experimental surgery that costs $200,000. I didn't come here to beg." "Oh no." Richardson laughed dismissively, causing several employees to laugh nervously along with him. "So what is this? A loan?" "It's a job offer," David replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the billionaires. "I've researched her company. I've discovered something interesting about her operations in poor neighborhoods that I think you'd like to know." Richardson's arrogant smile faltered for a second. Something in the young man's calm, determined tone bothered him. "What are you talking about?" David smiled slightly, not submissively, but with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going with this. "Mr. Richardson, have you ever wondered why her construction projects in poor communities are always 2 years behind schedule and 40% over budget?" The silence that filled the hall was deafening. Richardson felt a chill down his spine, but tried to maintain his composure. "You have 30 seconds before I have you arrested for trespassing." "Then I'll get straight to the point," said David, her confidence growing with every word. "I've been working in construction for 5 years. I know every contractor, every inspector, every neighborhood politician in the southern region. And I know exactly who's stealing millions from his social projects. His office. And this better be worth it." As they walked toward the private elevator, David held his sister's photo tightly. What Richardson didn't know was that those 6 months of research hadn't been just about corruption in the company. David had discovered something that could not only save Sophia, but completely transform the lives of thousands of families forgotten by society. If you're wondering how a young man from the suburbs got information that a billionaire didn't have about her own company, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what was about to happen in that office would not only change 2 lives, but reveal a network of corruption that no one ever imagined existed. In the $50 million office on the top floor, Richardson poured himself a $1,000 bottle of scotch and didn't even offer David any water. The young man remained standing in front of the mahogany desk while the billionaire settled into her Italian leather armchair. "So smart kid," Richardson said contemptuously, "impress me. What kind of corruption do you think you've uncovered in my company?" David took an old cell phone out of his pocket and placed it on the table. 3 weeks ago, while working on the construction of the Sunset Valley housing complex, one of his social projects, I overheard an interesting conversation between Chief Engineer Thomas Mitchell and Councilman James Walsh. "Mitchell has been one of my best employees for 15 years, Richardson interrupted, swirling his whiskey in his glass. "And Walsh approves our projects because he recognizes our excellence." "Excellence." David smiled bitterly. "Mr. Richardson, they're diverting 40% of the construction materials. Top-of-the-line cement becomes common cement. Steel rebar becomes cheap iron. The difference goes straight into his private construction projects. Houses that should last 50 years will start cracking in 5. Children will live in condemned structures because 2 rich men decided to get even richer." The billionaire stood up abruptly, her face red with anger. "Listen here, kid. You walk into my company, accuse my employees of theft, and you have the audacity to lecture me? Security." "Mr. Richardson," David said, his voice even calmer in the face of the outburst, "his company loses an average of $2.5 million per project due to these misappropriations. In 5 years, that's over $100 million that went out of his pocket and straight into hers. Richardson stopped with his hand on the phone. The numbers were alarmingly accurate with her own financial projections, losses he had attributed to unexpected costs, and market volatility. "You have 3 minutes to prove this or you're out of here in handcuffs," he growled, but his voice had lost some of its previous conviction. David took a deep breath, thinking of Sophia hooked up to tubes in the hospital, fighting leukemia that was consuming her strength every day. 3 months in the hospital had drained the family's savings. His father worked 18 hours a day as a night security guard, his mother cleaned offices in the early morning, and even then they couldn't afford half of the experimental treatment. "Sir, my sister is 8 years old and dying," David said, his voice trembling for the first time. "I could have taken this information to your competitors, to the media, or to the public prosecutor's office. But I came to you because I believe there are still people who do the right thing when they know the truth." Richardson studied the young man's face, looking for signs of lying or manipulation. What he found was a quiet, desperate determination that disturbed him deeply. "Even if his accusations had some basis in fact," he said, sitting back down, "what difference would it make? You want me to donate $200,000 because of some crazy story about corruption?" "I don't want a donation," David replied firmly. "I want to work. I can save 20% of the costs of every project by eliminating the kickbacks. In return, I ask only enough to save my sister." Richardson laughed again, but there was less cruelty and more disbelief now. "You, a construction worker, think you can do what my engineers and managers can't? Mr. Richardson, I grew up in these communities. I know every family that will live in those poorly built houses. I know exactly where every penny is being embezzled because I live on the side of the forgotten, not on the side of the profiteers." The billionaire was about to respond when his assistant entered without knocking. "Mr. Richardson, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. The Sunset Valley project. There are rumors in the press about the quality of the materials. Journalist Marcus Silva is asking questions about irregularities." Richardson realized in that moment that he had completely underestimated this young man. It wasn't just desperation that had brought him here, it was strategy. While everyone else in the office saw just another beggar from the outskirts, David had revealed himself to be his understanding exactly how to apply pressure at the right time, in the right place. Every word spoken with that unshakable calm, every fact presented at exactly the right moment, every movement calculated for maximum impact, all of this came from someone who had spent months meticulously planning this meeting, anticipating every reaction, every objection, every attempt to discredit her. Richardson dismissed his assistant with an impatient gesture and fixed his eyes on David like a predator studying her prey. "So you know the journalist Marcus Silva?" "I don't know him personally," David replied calmly, "but I know he's been investigating irregularities in housing projects for 6 months. An anonymous source has been providing him with very accurate information." The billionaire felt a chill run down his spine. "You—" "Mr. Richardson, I said I came here with a job offer, not threats." David kept his tone respectful, but there was a new firmness in her voice. "But I also didn't say I came alone in this fight." Richardson pressed the intercom. "Mitchell, come up to my office immediately. And bring the Sunset Valley project reports." While they waited, David took a second cell phone out of his pocket, this one much more modern than the first. "Sir, can I show you something that might interest you?" On the screen, a video recording clearly showed Thomas Mitchell receiving an envelope of cash from Councilman Walsh in a parking lot. The image quality was surprisingly good for a recording made from a distance. "Where did you get this?" Richardson asked, her voice completely losing its previous arrogance. "I've been working in construction for 5 years, but I also study civil engineering at night at community college," David said. "One of the subjects that interested me most was surveillance and security technology on construction sites." Richardson realized he had completely underestimated this young man. He wasn't just a desperate laborer. David had methodically prepared for this confrontation. "How many of these recordings do you have?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "Enough to document a pattern of behavior that goes back 3 years, David replied. "But like I said, I'm not here to destroy her company. I'm here to save it." At that moment, Mitchell entered the office carrying a bulky briefcase. The chief engineer, a burly 50-year-old man with graying hair, stopped abruptly when he saw David. "Mr. Richardson, why is this?" this laborer in his office? Mitchell asked with ill-concealed disdain. Thomas, Richardson said slowly, this young man has some interesting allegations about our projects. How about you explain why the costs at Sunset Valley exceeded the budget by 42%? Mitchell forced a nervous laugh. Sir, you know how construction is. Unexpected costs, weather changes, problems with suppliers. David stood up for the first time since entering the office. Mr. Mitchell, do you remember me? I worked at Sunset Valley for the past 8 weeks. I carried a lot of the cement you had diverted to her private construction site on Oak Street. Mitchell's face paled instantly. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Richardson, David said, turning to the billionaire, I can prove every penny that was diverted. I have photos of the trucks, license plates, delivery times, even the receipts that Mr. Mitchell left behind in the temporary office at the construction site. Richardson watched the look of panic grow on Mitchell's face, and a cold anger began to take hold of his. 15 years of trust, 15 years of delegating responsibility, and he was discovering that he had been systematically robbed by someone he considered practically a brother. Thomas, Richardson said with icy calm, you have 30 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't fire him right now and call the police. Mr. Richardson, don't believe this kid. Mitchell exploded, her mask of professionalism finally slipping. He's from the projects. Those people will make anything up to get money. Are you really going to take his word over her word? David remained unmoved by the racist attack, but Richardson saw something in the young man's eyes that made him hesitate. It wasn't anger, it was the cold, calculated determination of someone who had anticipated exactly that reaction. Mr. Mitchell, David said calmly, you're right about one thing. I am from the projects. And that's exactly why I can see what people like his do when he thinks no one is watching. David turned to Richardson. Sir, when you grow up in communities where every penny counts, you learn to notice when someone is wasting resources that should be benefiting families in need. When you work 12 hours a day to pay for night school, you develop an attention to detail that privileged people rarely have. Richardson studied the two men in front of her, Mitchell, sweating and stammering contradictory explanations, and David, maintaining an unshakable calm even in the face of racist insults. Mitchell, you're fired, Richardson said coldly. Security will escort you to the door. Tomorrow morning, my lawyers will be in touch regarding financial restitution and possible criminal charges. Mitchell looked incredulously at Richardson, then at David. You can't do this. 15 years of work. I built half his projects. You stole half his projects, Richardson corrected, pressing the intercom. Security, please. As Mitchell was escorted out, shouting threats and insults, David remained seated calmly. Richardson noticed that the young man showed neither satisfaction nor triumph, just the same quiet determination he had maintained throughout the conversation. Now, Richardson said, turning to David, let's talk about her proposal. David took a deep breath, thinking of his sister hooked up to machines in the hospital. Mr. Richardson, I didn't come here just to expose corruption. I came with a comprehensive plan to restructure his social projects in a way that will save money and truly benefit the communities. Go on, said Richardson, genuinely interested for the first time. First, implementation of a community oversight system, David began. Local residents trained to monitor construction, ensuring that materials and labor meet agreed-upon standards. Second, direct partnerships with local suppliers, eliminating middlemen who inflate costs. Third, a training program that hires local residents, creating permanent jobs in the communities that benefit. Richardson leaned forward, impressed by the detailed structure of the proposal. You thought of all this on your own. Not alone, David admitted for the first time. I've been working with people in my community for months. My neighbor, Donna Carmen, is a retired accountant and helped me with the financial projections. Professor Johnson from the community college advised me on legal issues. And Marcus Silva, the journalist, isn't just someone who's investigating, he grew up in the same area as me. At that moment, Richardson fully understood that he had underestimated not only David, but an entire network of intelligent and determined people who had systematically organized themselves to confront injustices that the elite didn't even recognize as problems. David wasn't a desperate young man making random accusations. He was the representative of an entire community that had grown tired of being exploited and had decided to act strategically and intelligently. Mr. Richardson, David said, pulling a thin folder from his inner jacket pocket. "Everything we've discussed today is just the first phase. What's in this folder is a 5-year plan that can transform his company into the national benchmark for responsible community development." Richardson reached for the folder, but David held it back for a moment. "Before you open this," David said, "I need you to understand something. I'm not here because I'm his victim. I'm here because I'm someone who has chosen to turn an unjust situation into an opportunity to create something greater than any of us could build alone." Richardson opened the folder David had handed him, and his expression changed completely. The first few pages contained high-resolution photographs of Mitchell receiving envelopes of cash, financial documents showing discrepancies between materials purchased and materials delivered, and a detailed spreadsheet with dates, times, and exact amounts for each misappropriation. How did you get this?" Richardson muttered, flipping through page after page of meticulously organized evidence. "Mr. Richardson, I've been working in construction for 5 years, David replied calmly. "But what I didn't mention is that I'm also president of the Southern Region Construction Workers Union. We represent over 3,000 workers who work on projects like his." Richardson looked up, beginning to understand the true magnitude of what he was facing. "Go on." "Over the past 2 years, we've received dozens of complaints about substandard materials in housing construction. Workers reporting orders to use cheaper cement, inadequate rebar, poor thermal insulation. All of these complaints came from her company's projects." David took another cell phone out of his pocket and showed him a screen with dozens of messages. "We created a WhatsApp group called Community Watch. 3,000 workers documenting irregularities, photographing misappropriations, recording suspicious conversations. Everything legal, everything within the construction sites where we work legitimately." Richardson felt his hands shaking. 3,000 people. 3,000 families who depend on these jobs, but who have grown tired of being unwitting accomplices to a system that hurts other poor families, David corrected her. "And this is just the beginning." David showed him a new folder, even thicker than the last one. "Mr. Richardson, Mitchell wasn't the only one. We have similar evidence on 12 other managers and engineers at her company. The corruption scheme is systemic." "Why didn't you take this straight to the police, asked Richardson. "Because the police would investigate, prosecute the guilty parties, and nothing would change structurally," replied David. "In 2 years, new Mitchells would appear. The system would remain vulnerable. The communities would continue to suffer." David opened the main folder and spread out a set of architectural plans, financial projections, and professionally prepared contracts on the table. "This is his real proposal, Mr. Richardson. I didn't come here just to expose problems. I came to implement permanent solutions." Richardson examined the documents, impressed by the level of detail and professionalism. "Who prepared this?" "Carmen Rodriguez, an accountant with 30 years of experience in corporate auditing, forced into retirement at 55 due to age cuts," David said. "Professor Michael Johnson, an expert in sustainable urban development, fired from the university for controversial research on gentrification. Marcus Silva, an award-winning investigative journalist who left the newspaper after they censored his reports on real estate corruption." Richardson realized that he was facing not just a determined young woman, but an organized network of highly skilled professionals who had been marginalized by the system and were now joining forces to transform it from within. "And lawyer Sarah Chun," David continued, "an expert in business law and community development, who left an elite law firm to open a popular legal clinic. She drafted all the contracts and checked the legality of every aspect of our proposal." David took a final document out of his pocket. "Mr. Richardson, what I have here is a cooperation agreement already approved by the Public Prosecutor's Office. If His Excellency agrees to implement our reform program, the evidence of corruption will be used only to fire those involved and recover misappropriated funds. If he refuses..." Richardson didn't need David to finish the sentence. "You make everything public." "This isn't blackmail, Mr. Richardson," David said respectfully. "It's an opportunity to transform her company from a source of exploitation into a national model of responsible development. You can be remembered as the billionaire who chose profit over people, or as the visionary who proved that business success and social justice can coexist." Richardson studied the young man's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What he found was pure determination combined with impressive strategic vision. "What exactly is his proposal?" he asked. David took a deep breath, thinking of Sophia in the hospital, connected to the machines that kept her alive. First, the creation of a community oversight department within your company, with its own budget and autonomy to conduct audits. Second, priority hiring of local labor for all social projects. Third, direct partnerships with certified local suppliers. Go on, said Richardson, genuinely interested. Fourth, a professional training program that transforms beneficiaries of housing projects into skilled technicians for maintenance and expansion. Fifth, the creation of a community fund financed by a percentage of project profits, earmarked for education and healthcare in the beneficiary regions. Richardson quickly calculated. That would reduce our profits by 20% per individual project, David interrupted, but it would eliminate 70% of the extra costs caused by corruption, resulting in a net increase of 45% in overall profitability. The billionaire looked at the numbers in his briefcase and realized that David was absolutely correct. The math was flawless. What about her? Richardson asked softly. David swallowed hard. My proposal is to work as general coordinator of this new department for 5 years. Salary equivalent to what Mitchell was receiving, plus a share of the profits saved. With that, I can pay for Sophia's treatment and still support his family while he finishes his engineering degree. Richardson recognized the brilliant intelligence of the proposal. David wasn't asking for charity, he was offering a solution that would benefit everyone involved, creating real value rather than simply redistributing existing resources. And if I agree to all of this, Richardson said slowly, I have her guarantee that the evidence against Mitchell and the others will never become public? Mr. Richardson, David replied, you'll have something much better than our guarantee. You'll have our partnership. Carmen will become his new head of internal auditing. Professor Johnson will take over as sustainable development consultant. Marcus Silva will be his director of community communications. Sarah Chun will handle all legal matters. Richardson finally understood that this wasn't just a desperate young man asking for help. It was a proposal to merge two worlds, the capital and expertise of her company with the intelligence, determination, and community legitimacy of people who had been systematically excluded from the structures of power. How long have you been planning this? He asked. 2 years, David admitted. Since we discovered that the houses where our families live were being built with materials stolen from other projects intended for families like ours. Richardson stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city he had helped build. After a few minutes of reflection, he turned back to David. When can we start? David felt tears burning in his eyes, but he kept his voice steady. Tomorrow morning, Mr. Richardson. Carmen has already prepared a full audit that will identify all the misappropriations over the last 3 years. Professor Johnson has a 90-day implementation schedule, and Marcus Silva has a communication strategy that will turn this change into a milestone for the entire industry. Richardson extended his hand to David. Welcome to Richardson Industries, Mr. Santos. Let's build something our families will be proud to leave as a legacy. As they shook hands, they both knew that this handshake represented more than a business agreement. It was the beginning of a silent revolution that would prove that intelligence, preparation, and justice always win over arrogance, privilege, and exploitation. As David left the office, his cell phone rang. It was Sophia's doctor with good news about a new treatment option that had just become available. For the first time in months, David smiled, knowing that her sister would not only have the surgery, but a future in a slightly more just society. 18 months later, David Santos walked through the halls of Richardson Industries no longer as a desperate young man, but as the youngest director in the company's history. Her sister Sophia, now 10 years old and completely cured, accompanied him on that special day, the inauguration of the first housing complex built under the new community development model. Davi, look at all the people, said Sophia, pointing to the hundreds of families celebrating the delivery of her new homes. Children ran through the community gardens while his parents received the keys to homes built with top-quality materials and financed fairly. Richardson watched the scene from her desk in her office, now decorated with awards for social responsibility and sustainability. The company's transformation had generated not only record profits but national recognition as a model of ethical development. Thomas Mitchell, on the other hand, was facing his third court hearing for embezzlement. Her consulting firm had gone bankrupt, her reputation was in tatters, and the million-dollar contracts that had once guaranteed his luxury lifestyle had turned into unpayable debts. The man who had once despised workers like David now worked as a construction material salesman, earning a tenth of what he used to steal every month. "Mr. David," said Carmen Rodriguez, now the company's chief auditor, "the quarterly figures are in. 62% savings in costs, an 80% increase in community satisfaction, and net profits 45% higher than last year." David smiled, remembering that terrible morning when he didn't know if he would be able to save Sophia. Today, in addition to her healthy sister, he had created a system that benefited thousands of families and proved that business success and social justice were not contradictory concepts. The young man who had once been humiliated at the reception desk for looking inappropriate was now sought after by universities for lectures on social innovation. Professor Johnson had returned to higher education with a chair funded by Richardson Industries itself. Marcus Silva ran the company's communications department, turning each project into a national example of responsible development. Richardson descended to the lobby, where a golden plaque had replaced the old elitist decor, David Santos Community Development Center, where intelligence and justice build the future. "You know what I've learned in these 18 months?" Richardson said to David as they watched the families celebrating. "That true wealth isn't how much money we can accumulate, but how many lives we can transform for the better." David nodded, thinking about how that journey had begun with despair and turned into hope for thousands of people. Every house built with quality, every family benefited fairly, every young person hired from the community represented a victory against a system that seemed impossible to change. The best revenge against those who underestimate her intelligence is not to destroy them, it is to build something so great that they realize how much she wasted by underestimating his potential. David Santos proved that preparation, strategy, and determination always win over privilege, arrogance, and prejudice. While Sophia played with other children in the complex that his brother had helped create, David understood that sometimes the greatest victories begin with the most desperate moments. If this story of overcoming adversity touched his heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that intelligence and courage can transform any injustice into an opportunity to create a better world.